Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta But let me, there's too much light here. Let me just turn that down. We're continuing our reading. And I need someone to help me, to let me know where we left off reading. Unfortunately, Nadia is not able to get internet. We may end up, I don't know. You can read the same thing and just... Did we talk about Lord Chaitanya taking sannyas? I think we did. Yes? I can't remember. I need help. Help me. Maybe we'll end up reading things over. Anyway. If someone can contact... I don't know if Nadia can get online now. She's not able to get online. In the document we stopped on, in the meantime, the companions of the Lord. Oh, Nadia's here. Fantastic. Okay, let me find that. Let me just go down, get ready, and then we'll have a little kirtan. We talked about Chora Gopinath. Yeah, I remember that. Sarvabhauma. He met Sarvabhauma in the meantime. Okay. This is okay. I've got it. So we'll have a little kirtan. Kirtaniya Sadahari. And then we will continue. We have to have kirtan of the age. Right? How can you exist without kirtan? I don't know. Some of us try to exist without kirtan, but isn't it? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Govinda Govinda Govinda. I have a different mic here, so not sounding the same. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Giribhardhari Gopijana Vallabha Giribhardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giribhardhari Gopi Janavallabha Giribhardhari Yasodanandana Yasodanandana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Janavallabha Giribhardhari Gopi Janavallabha Giribhardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Giribhardhari Gopi Janavallabha Giribhardhari Yasodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Suranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Suranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha Madhava. Jai Go Paramanandi Hari Hari Bo. Krishna Govinda. Kunjabi Hari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari. This is the microphone I use for making videos, and I had to use it in where I am now to make a recording, audio recording, because the other mic wasn't good. So I just left it there. You don't have to see anything here, but I'll have to take it down when we make other videos. So that's what's going on here right now today. So the last thing we read was about Sharva Bhauma Bhattacharya. Sharva Bhauma Bhattacharya. If you're Bengali, that's how you'll say it. Who was trying to help Mahaprabhu, who was a very young sannyasi, wanted to guide him. And Mahaprabhu told him, I can't understand anything you're saying. Sarvabhauma said, are you understanding? And Mahaprabhu said, well, I understand Vedanta, but when you speak it, I have no idea what you're talking about. Whoa! A slap in the face to the greatest scholar of the day, or one of the greatest. Hare Krishna. So, but this hasn't happened yet. I guess we're going to read about it. What has happened is that Mahaprabhu fainted in the temple. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya took him home. Didn't know who he was, but he ascertained these were genuine symptoms of ecstasy, not imitation. In the meantime, the companions of the Lord who reached the temple a little after him heard of the Lord's transcendental feats and of his being carried away by Bhattacharya. The pilgrims at the temple were still gossiping about the incident. But by chance, one of these pilgrims had met Gopinath Acharya, who was known to Gadadhar Pandit, and from him it was learned that the Lord was lying in an unconscious state at the residence of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who happened to be the brother-in-law of Gopinath Acharya. Acharya. All the members of the party were introduced. Lord Chaitanya used to imitate, when he would travel, at least in some places, he would imitate the accents of some of the local people. I am now doing the Bengali accent. Gopinath Acharya. All the members of the party were introduced by Gadadhar Pandit to Gopinath Acharya, who took them all to the house of the Bhattacharya, where the Lord was lying unconscious in a spiritual trance. All the members then chanted loudly the holy name of the Lord as usual, and the Lord regained his consciousness. After this, the Bhattacharya received all the members of the party, including Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and asked them to become his guests of honor. The party, including the Lord, went for a bath in the sea, and the Bhattacharya arranged for their residence and meals at the house of Kashi Mishra. Gopinath Acharya, his brother-in-law, also assisted. There were some friendly talks about the Lord's divinity between the two brothers-in-law. And in this argument, Gopinath Acharya, who knew the Lord before, now tried to establish the Lord as the personality of Godhead. And the Bhattacharya tried to establish him as one of the great devotees. In other words, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya did not understand. He doesn't know who Lord Chaitanya is. And he's not understanding who he is by, at this point, not yet is he understanding. He will understand because Mahaprabhu is going to give him a vision. There's nothing to understand. He's just going to see Krishna in his different features. Okay. Both of them argued from the angle of vision of authentic Shastras and not on the strength of sentimental vox populi, vox populi, public opinion. The incarnations of God are determined by authentic Shastras and not by popular votes of foolish fanatics. Well, this Baba's God, how do you know? I said, well, we voted him in. In the 70s, there was one God, he was voted in by his mother. So I am the mother of God. And he is, my son is God. He was 14 years old at that time or something. 13. 1970, I think he was 13. And then something happened. There was some fallout between him and his mother. And then she renounced him and said, actually, he's not God. Then I think she said, my other son is God. So that God was voted in and that God was voted out. As easily as he was voted in, he was voted out. And he used to be honored, worshipped like God to some degree. Hare Krishna. Another really interesting point, I don't know if you picked up on this point, but Prabhupada said they're having an argument about the position of Lord Chaitanya. And they're both arguing from Shastra. Isn't that, it's so interesting, right? We're having an argument, and you would think if you're just arguing, then you're speculating. But here it's saying they're both arguing on the basis of Shastra. And you've probably seen that before, that sometimes we're using Shastra, but we're coming from different perspectives. In this case, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, his knowledge was lacking in understanding Lord Chaitanya and the personal concept of God. So he was arguing from the impersonal concept and not aware of the Shastric evidence. So they're arguing on the basis of Shastra. This is a problem. I was studying a little bit about hermeneutics, and in hermeneutics it gives you tools by which to better understand what is being said. Tools to understand your own subjectivity, context, the principles, the context of the whole Shastra, the context of the situation, and so many other contexts. But two people can be using hermeneutics, but using slightly different hermeneutic principles or looking at things in slightly different ways. So I think we're familiar with this. If you've heard enough classes, you've probably heard the same thing looked at in a different way, which doesn't mean that the different ways are wrong. It's just different ways to understand something. And if something is unlimited, as our philosophy is, it's not difficult to understand. It could be seen in different ways. And seen from different, so to speak, what am I trying to say? Levels in an apartment. Levels. They don't call them levels. What do you call them? Different stories, yeah. So I'm looking at something from the 20th story. You're looking something on the ground from the first story. We're looking at the same thing. You have a better view of it. It looks different to me. I may not see any detail. So that's there. And the real challenge, huge challenge that we all face if we want to make the Hare Krishna movement a success, is being able to respectfully disagree sometimes without offending the other person, without minimizing their intelligence, without minimizing their understanding. Even if it's not your understanding, even if you're trying to understand it from their perspective, but it doesn't make sense to you based on your understanding of the philosophy, what you've read, what you've heard, but it makes sense to them, and that has to be respected, as long as what they're saying has some validity within the realm of Shastra. And so this is very, very important for us to learn, to adapt to. Obviously, not everyone will agree with the way we understand what Prabhupada has said. And oftentimes, if we disagree with them, we may belittle them, thinking that they lack intelligence or lack spiritual acumen, and that's why they can't understand, or they have personal agendas, or they're ill-motivated in some way. Not necessarily true. It may be how they've understood Prabhupada. You could say how they've wanted to understand Prabhupada, but then you could say that for both parties who are arguing. Anyway, if one is sincerely trying to understand Prabhupada and he doesn't agree with some other understandings, or she doesn't agree, then he or she at least needs to learn to make compromises, to learn to respect that this is how the other people see it, even though it may not make sense to you. This is absolutely necessary if we're going to remain a united movement. And then the question we ask is, what's more important? Standing up for your truth or keeping ISKCON united? And if you're standing up for a truth that is opposidantic, obviously that's not of value, but that's not acceptable. But if you're standing up for a truth, you don't think it's opposidantic, so that discussion's not going to be there, at least from your part. Now, if you think the other discussion is opposidantic, yes, then compromising with opposidanta we don't want to do. But the question will naturally arise, not everybody agrees with you in thinking this is opposidantic, so it's not always so obvious. So if two sincere advanced devotees have different understandings of the same thing, and they're both sincere and they're both serving, and they both have, say, valid reference for why they see things the way they do, then the specific consciousness or skill set, however you want to word it, required is respectful compromise without belittling the spiritual advancement or intelligence or culture of the other person, because I've seen this. Well, you don't understand this because you have no culture, or it's not your culture, you're from the West. Well, you don't understand this because you're from India, and that you don't understand how to preach in the West. Actually, both of them could be true, could be right. But even for the sake of argument, if we accept they're both right, but they're both right within their context. Yeah, well, in preaching in India, you don't do this. But preaching in the West, you don't do this. So obviously, sometimes differences are simply contextual. What context are you speaking in? And for me, often, if it's a debate on how to spread Krishna consciousness, then often the debate is won by that devotee who's most successful in attracting people. And some devotees are successful at attracting people in the West, they wouldn't attract people in India, or they would attract, with that preaching, they would attract the wrong people. And some devotees are very successful preaching in the East, but if they preached that way in the West, they would attract a very small group of people, mostly Indian, or people very inclined to traditional values, but your average person, modern person, wouldn't relate. These are realities. So, mature devotees will learn to respect others for what they believe and be willing to make compromises to keep the movement unified. So this is very, very important. If we don't learn to do that, then we will end up like every other religion in creating many, many factions. I think Christianity is the religion that has the most factions, and they are, some of it is political, or was political, but a lot of it is theological, over the position of Jesus, over the position of the Pope, things like that. Reformist movements, disagreeing, or conservative movements, being reformist liberal, reformist conservative. And that's history. And that could very likely happen to us, and if that happens, then we are going to not succeed on the level that we could. So that's why this is so important. It's we sacrifice our interest for the interest of the world. In the interest of the world, it's better that ISKCON remains unified. If we want to stand to our guns and say, no, I'm dropping out, I'm creating my own movement now, we have one of our godbrothers who is creating a new Hare Krishna movement because he feels the old one is contaminated. So he's creating a new one. And so there's an example, right? Notwithstanding the many observations he has made about the problems and faults within ISKCON and leadership, that's another issue. But true, everybody knows. But it wasn't Prabhupada's idea to create a new movement. This movement's useless. The leaders are useless. Now, for entertainment's sake, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's one devotee who's also forming a new movement. And his logo is the swastika, if that tells you anything about his mental health. And he has decided that he's qualified to be the acharya of that movement. That's the only movement that's going to save the world. So, and then we have the Ritvik movement, which is a movement, definitely a movement. And various branches of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, who from disciples of Srila Prabhupada that started their own movements. So the trend is, it's a human trend. And in one sense you could say, well, more variety the better. These godbrothers we had who are good devotees started their own preaching, doing wonderful preaching, very successful. How can you argue with that? In one sense, you can't. But all you can say is, if we were united, we would be more powerful. Or as the saying goes, you can go fast alone, but you go further as a group. So sometimes you get clogged in bureaucracy, trying to work within an organization. But if you can work through it, in the long run, you'll do more as a group of many heads together working is better than one. But sometimes we prefer to be independent and just do what we want on our own. It's faster, it's easier. And so we get some things done, but not as much. We get them done faster. So these are the austerities that we undergo in Krishna consciousness. You are going to hear classes that sometimes may appear to contradict another class you've heard. And often the contradiction is only due to a lack of knowledge or a lack of perspective. Is this car good? Well, it's a safe car. It's a reliable car. It's got good ratings. But in terms of driving experience, it's not like you take a trip and get out after 500 miles and you feel refreshed. There's some cars after 500 miles you actually feel refreshed. So if you're looking at it from the point of view of reliability, functionality, economy, let's say, yeah, it's a good car. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of speed, comfort, good looks, then it is not a good car. So that's sometimes why we will see apparent contradictions, because the speaker may be approaching the topic from a specific point of view. Is brahmachari life good, or is brahmachari life bad? Is grihastha life good, or is grihastha life bad? Is vanapras good? Is it bad? Is sannyas good, or is it bad? And the answer is yes. And the yes depends on the individual and the context. Is brahmachari life good? Yes, for some people. Is grihastha life good? Yes, for some people. Is vanapras life good? Yes. Well, vanapras is kind of natural. You don't always have a choice. You just get old, and your kids leave you, and if you stay with your spouse, then you're actually by default vanapras. For some people, at the vanapras stage, they remarry. So, then you can say, well, it's not good for everybody. Is sannyas life good? Yes, it's good. Is it good for everybody? No. It's not good for the people who aren't qualified for it. So, it's all contextual. Sometimes when we study history, we say, this president was very good. Then you go into your master's thesis on that president, and you find out, yeah, there's a lot of trash on him. But for the sake of history and the glory of our country, what the public generally knows about him is that he did these 5 good acts. But we don't know the other 108 bad things he did behind the scenes, because that would ruin his reputation, and we prefer to have reputations of our presidents untarnished in the public image. So sometimes it's like that. So, but yes, he's good, but from this perspective, he did something horrible. I heard a story about one of our presidents in America who was always glorified. You'll always see him glorified in public. But when you study his presidency, it has been determined he was the worst president ever. But the party of that president, after he left office, made propaganda about, in looking at his legacy, which was all false, because it was so bad it would tarnish their party. So, of course, you can say something good or bad about anybody. So, sometimes if you hear something and you say, I don't know, it doesn't seem like Prabhupada said it exactly that way. It's a perspective, and the perspective also often makes sense to the person in their context, their nature. They're by nature renounced, austere, very strict, and so forth. So they may say something, and you might think, well, that's really narrow. But that is what works for them. Being narrow, being straight, is what works for them and what they believe works for ISKCON. So that's why they say it. And someone else is not so narrow and straight, and they believe that it's better to be more open, accommodating, etc. And so they have a slightly different view of the same thing. This is human nature. You can't avoid it. Well, can't avoid human nature. Mm. Okay. Oh, you say once Nityananda Prabhu, and so there he does. We're walking down the road. We stopped there? Now I'm really confused. So we have a question. Yesterday in the temple by Christi, in the temple class, one Prabhu explained to me another point of when Chaitanya turned black. And Lord Chaitanya said it was for taking the sins of others, but actually he manifested his original form without them realizing it. Ha 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 ha. That's funny. I never heard that story. Different point of view. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Excuse me to write something down. Okay. What is more important, standing up for your truth or seeing ISKCON united? That is a question. This question was asked to Rabindra Swarup. It was asked this way. Rabindra Swarup Prabhu. I can make a t-shirt out of this. He said, I asked him actually, what's a higher truth? Standing up for the truth or keeping ISKCON united? And he said, the highest truth is to keep ISKCON united. I thought that was an interesting answer, kind of combining both points of view. So he said, I said, you want to stick up for your Siddhanta, but what's the highest Siddhanta? The highest Siddhanta is to keep ISKCON united. So there you go. Solve that dilemma, right? If you ever run into this problem, you can just say, well, Rabindra Swarup Prabhu said the highest Siddhanta is to keep ISKCON united. Yeah, so the thing about hermeneutics is that not all hermeneutic tools are the same. So you may use different hermeneutic tools than somebody else, and therefore you're going to read the same thing and come to different conclusions. That's what makes it so interesting, because, the thought was, well, if we have one hermeneutic procedure, then we all will look at the philosophy through this same lens. But Christians use hermeneutics, and they have like thousands of divisions. So they're using different hermeneutic tools. So then you're not even able to agree on the hermeneutic principles by which to understand how to understand. So it's Kali Yuga. It's like unlimitedly divisible. And what I've seen as a devotee over the years, just within ISKCON, that wherever there's something to disagree on, it leads into a potential for some big disagreements. It could be a little disagreement, but then I agree, you agree, he agrees on this side, she agrees, he agrees, she agrees on that side. Now we have two parties disagreeing. And somehow or other, the nature of Kali Yuga is people like to disagree and fight over things. Sometimes I see posts on the internet about what's disturbing people, and I often think, don't you have anything better to do than be disturbed by this? If you want to get disturbed, why not be disturbed by all the conditioned souls who don't have Krishna consciousness? That seems a worthy thing to be disturbed by, but if you're disturbed by what the grihastas are doing or what the sannyasis are doing, and that occupies you, probably better things to be disturbed by, right? But there are so many divisions based on culture, based on sex, on gender, on race, ethnicity. And every time there's a difference, there's a potential to create a faction. Let me give an example, although this didn't create a faction, but it was just interesting. The first country outside of the United States, well, the second country, the first was Canada, which is almost like a different, it's so similar to America. You don't even realize you're in another country. Except when you hear a few words, when they say out, they say out, and about. And then when they say, well, Prabhu, I'm going to be out and about, then you realize, oh, I'm in Canada. But other than that, and a few British remnants, the Queen may come once in a while. You don't really realize it's really any different than the United States of America. But I went to South Africa, and that was really different. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Hare Krishna. What was I talking about? I got woken up early this morning. When that happens, I forget. There was something in South Africa. Oh, yeah. I don't know. But we were talking about... Oh, yeah, I remember. So I was in South Africa, and there were a lot of devotees from America and Europe, because they were the ones that started preaching. And then, at that time, 81, all the South Africans, except for a few, maybe 3 local South Africans or 2, they were all Indian. Because of apartheid, black people couldn't live in our temples because they weren't allowed to live in a white or an Indian area. So it was basically 1 or 2, maximum 3 white South Africans, all Indian South Africans, and then Americans and Europeans. And one day we were taking prasadam, and all of a sudden I noticed that all the foreign devotees were sitting in a circle together, and all the Indian South African devotees were sitting in a circle together eating. Now, the Hare Krishna movement is not a movement that supports apartheid. And unconsciously, we had created prasadam apartheid. Like nobody arranged it. Okay, all the Indians sit there, second-class citizens. All the foreigners, the white men, white supremacy, you sit there. You will get pancakes with strawberries, and you Indians will get rice with no butter. No, it wasn't like that at all. It just happened. So divisions happen naturally. Oh, you're American, that's why you don't understand. Oh, you're Indian, that's why you don't understand. Oh, you're Russian. Russians can't understand that. Oh, you're not Russian. There, you can't understand the preaching in Russia because you're not Russian. So there's all these divisions. So we have to be extremely careful, because whenever there's division, then, because it's Kali Yuga, we love to fight. It's just the sport of Kali Yuga. Everybody loves to fight. Some controversy, let's fight about it. Look at politics. Whoa, do we love to fight? Do we love to put down the party we're not on? It's amazing. It's Kali Yuga. So just be careful, because this could destroy us individually and as a movement. Vijay Lakshmi says, people will be the same everywhere, no different in the new movements, so their problems will be the same. Yeah, because just because you have a better philosophy, just because you have higher ideals, just because you have a great spiritual master like Srila Prabhupada, doesn't necessarily mean you and I are going to be any better, because we still have our human frailties. And what we have is the potential to be better, because we have an amazing process, amazing scriptures, amazing mantra, amazing association. What to speak of amazing prasadam. But that doesn't guarantee anything, because it has to be taken properly and has to be taken humbly. And if we allow our human nature to override us, it could undermine all the good that Krishna consciousness brings. And the lower, quote unquote, the lower self could dominate. It's not uncommon. Dear, this is from Kelly. Dear devotees, this Hanan Alis, medium person, was asking people to DM. DM means what? Do not do so. He or she has an empty profile. No friends. The only photo is a suggested photo of an attractor. Seems to be. I don't know who that is. Krishna Karshni says, anyway, if he shows up, don't make friends with him. Krishna Karshni says, should devotees who have different view of KC and different view of preaching try to cooperate or just keep respectful distance and cooperate with those who have the same vision? It seems cooperating with those who have the same vision will create less frictions. You know, what you say is true, but it could also backfire. Because I don't know if you've ever seen this, but you don't want two temples in one city that are criticizing one another. And so a guest comes and said, how did you hear about us? And he said, well, I went to the other temple. You did? You went to the other? You shouldn't go there. They're bogus. You imagine if you're coming to the temple and someone told you the other Hare Krishna temple in the city 3 miles away is bogus. So you run the risk of that. You know, naturally, devotees will gravitate to work with like-minded devotees. But this is a potential problem because now you have sides, conservative, liberal, and then they may start opposing one another, criticizing one another, condemning one another, which is bad for them and bad for the public. As you know, Krishna Karshni, sometimes you don't have a choice of working with like-minded devotees. It's just we all have to work together, and that's more about what I'm talking about. I think naturally we will gravitate in projects we develop to work with people who are like-minded. Naturally we'll attract people who are like-minded because of the nature of the project, the nature of the way we're doing things, the strategy, and so forth. But I was just thinking the other day, for an American, just an Indian, just being Indian, it's so funny to us. You don't have to be funny, you just have to be Indian. And it's so different Indians are so different than we are. And I'm sure for Indians, we must be funny to you, because we don't go like this. The Gurukulis who grew up in India, they love to imitate the Indians. They have a lot of fun. They're really good at it because it's so funny to them. It's just normal for Indians. I guess for Indians, we're kind of funny to you. As they say, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. So might as well laugh. Sometimes we have to laugh at the differences, Krishna Karshini. Sometimes Indians will say, Prabhuji, 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 how much time it takes for chanting one round? And I say, well, depends. No, I need exact time. Well, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7, some devotees 10 minutes, No, Prabhu, there must be exact time. Perfect time for chanting one round. I must know how much. And, we as Westerners are thinking, are you a machine? Are you programmed? Are you actually real? Or is this like a robot with artificial intelligence that just looks human? So to us, it's like, this is really weird. But for many Indians, no, everything is about exactly how you do it. It must be done exactly perfectly. This is the rule. I need to know the rule. What direction I must sit when I chant? And I have my compass here, Prabhu. Tell me exactly which direction. And what time I should sit down. And we as Westerners are thinking, what are you talking about? Just chant, like devotion. No, I must know exactly where to sit, when to sit, how to sit. And Prabhuji, is it okay if I whisper or must I chant out loud or medium? Or medium loud, medium quiet? You tell me exactly what. And we're thinking, oh my God, this is like, something's wrong here. That's, and the Americans are like, whatever, chant on your head, walk, sit, lay down, who cares? Just get your rounds done. Yeah. The Americans are like total opposite, right? It's just, culture. Prabhu, there might be grains in that drink. It's Ekadasi. Don't be a fanatic. Yeah, just like, just chill out, Prabhu, don't take it so seriously. So that's the American, like, anything goes. The Indians, like, everything perfect. So naturally, the cultures are so different. So it's going to take work to kind of like work together, isn't it? So that's the challenge. It's really easy to work with people that are like you. It doesn't take much work. But work with the people that aren't like you. That takes work. Doesn't it? So I hope I didn't offend any Indians or offend any Westerners. But that's, exaggeration. It's an exaggerated example of how different cultures are. Direct message. Okay. So, Parnanda says, I know a man, he has no good karma for making good relationships with women. So maybe he should be a brahmachari, take sannyas. Like, yeah. Sometimes it's true. You want to have a relationship, but you can't. But that's another issue. So, I'm offering you a challenge, Krishna Karshani and everyone else. My challenge is get along with the people you don't get along. We just got a new T-shirt. I could have worn it for you. It says, really came out nicely. Just got it yesterday, and it fits really well. It says, you've heard me say this, love the people you hate, even if you hate to love them. So that's the, love the people you hate, even if you hate to love them. That's the challenge. And I don't think I can underemphasize this challenge, because right now in our movement, this challenge is right dead center. There is a strong, strong push in preaching in the West, and many, many devotees are having success preaching this way, to be very adaptive, to be very accepting, to be very open, and bring people in. Open the doors wide, get them inside, and gradually they'll understand Krishna consciousness. But spoon feed them. Not that you're not giving them nutritious food, but you're spoon feeding them what they can digest, what will taste good for them. And that some devotees are having extreme amounts of success preaching that way. And then there's the other side. It's like, why compromise? Why water down? We have to go establish the tradition. Varnashram has been neglected. We have a culture. We can't just compromise with Western culture. You have these two very, very strong elements. And within that, there's so many divisions. What's the duty of a husband, the duty of a wife, the duty of men, the duty of women, the duty of brahmachari, grihastha, vanavasa? So many duties. And the Western will be like, well, it's more fluid and dynamic because times are changing. And, I have a joke and someone says, we're trying to have a Vedic marriage. And my reply is, oh, when's the divorce? Like a Vedic marriage. Like you're like Devahuti and he's Kardama. I don't think so. I don't think you can do that. So I make a joke like basically saying, are you kidding me? Like that's going to destroy everything, because you'll expect your wife to be like Devahuti. She'll expect you to be like Kardama. You'll be completely let down. Completely frustrated. Okay, I'm exaggerating, joking a little bit, but you understand the dichotomy. No, we need to have this. This is the Vedic ideal. It should be this way. No, it's not going to work. It's different. We're not trained this way. You try to impose this culture on another culture, it's not going to work. So we have this dynamic, and it's getting much stronger than ever I've ever seen it. It's getting extremely polarized, and politics is polarized left and right. Religion polarized left and right. Everything's polarized left and right. So we as individuals have to be able to navigate the left and the right, no matter what side you are on. Otherwise, we will start making offenses, creating factions, the movement will split. And the once glorious Hare Krishna movement that was going to be of so much benefit for the world will just be a bunch of little organizations working independently. It's not impossible, so it depends on us. And then Krishna Karshani says, for second generation devotees, it might be difficult to know whose vision is real, of Prabhupada is real. I was just having this conversation with my daughter, and she was saying, well, you say, not you, me, but she says, someone says, well, this is, what I believe about Prabhupada. And she said, okay, that's fine. That's what you believe. Doesn't mean it's exactly. And I said, well, do you have a reason to believe it's not that way? Until you have a reason to believe it's not that way, then why doubt it? Or just accept that that is real for him. That's how he perceived Prabhupada. In his particular nature, his particular relationship, he sees Prabhupada that way. And that is valid. Whether it's valid universally, at least it was valid to him. This is what helped him and inspired him. So I wouldn't say it's wrong. I would just say this is how he, as an individual, understood this statement of Srila Prabhupada. The movement over time will try to, and I don't know if we can do this as effectively as we like, but we'll try to establish in areas which are more controversial what the learned devotees and massive devotees have understood Prabhupada to mean, so that we don't have this kind of confusion. A lot of it is contextual. Well, Prabhupada said something within a certain context. He meant it in a specific way for that situation, for that person. So if you don't understand context, that's part of hermeneutics. If you don't understand context, then you may not understand. Why did he say that? Prabhupada said we could do this. Why did he say that? Because it seems like he never said we could do that before. He said, because the government was about to do this or that and shut down the movement, so he said, well, it would be okay if we did this in that situation. Didn't mean that we would do it in other situations. So you have to understand these things. We made adjustments to comply with the government. So we don't do certain things that are fundamental in other countries. So you have to be intelligent enough to understand these things a little bit. Different Prabhupada disciples seem to see Prabhupada in different ways. Sometimes it is a bit confusing. It can be confusing, however, if we just accept, well, that's one way to see Prabhupada. That's the way they saw him, and that's a valid way to see it. Not the only way necessarily, but a way. Human beings, Vijay Lakshmi says, human beings are very complicated. Oh, you've noticed that also. All boils down to the false ego which leaders and preachers have to overcome and create a peaceful, amicable environment for the organization. The maturity has to begin from the top. So your next statement, Vijay Lakshmi, has to be translated into English because I don't understand. I think you typed the wrong letters. Bujis. What are bujis? books as this. I'm lost. So, yeah, if you ever become a leader, don't ever think that you're better. Don't ever think that now, because you're a leader, everything you say is perfect. Everything you do is perfect. And you can treat anybody any way you feel like because you're a leader. If we do that, we will have undermined the principle of service and humility. So that's definitely a foundation. Thank you for pointing that out. As Pink Floyd would say, what would they say? Pink Floyd became popular, I think, right after I became a devotee, so I'm not a... What would Pink Floyd say? They would say, comfortably numb. Is that what they would say? Just be numb and nothing will bother you. Visions don't happen naturally. It's ingrained from childhood, from generations. Well, that's kind of natural, isn't it? Now that it's ingrained. It's naturally ingrained. Yeah. Vijay Lakshmi, just imagine you were raised in New York City. You'd be quite a different person, wouldn't you? Imagine I was raised in India in 1950. I'd be a much different person. I would be extremely conservative, most likely, right? Extremely traditional. Wouldn't I, Vijay Lakshmi, if I was raised in India? Most likely. What to speak of South India? So yes, divisions, we're pre-programmed. We're pre-programmed to be on one side of the equation or the other. At least we should recognize it, that this is not our identity. Mahaprabhu says, Prabhupada's success was unity and diversity. So Prabhupada asked us all the time to create unity and diversity. And so the big question is, what's the unity? The diversity is pretty obvious. And the diversity happens. You don't have to make any effort. There will be diversity. What's the unity? Well, one thing Prabhupada said the unity is we're all doing this to please Krishna. So you may say A, B, C, I say D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah, D, E, F. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I wonder, I'll get so old I won't even remember the alphabet. That would be dangerous. So what's the unity? It's for Krishna's pleasure. So at least when we disagree with someone, at least we should remember that their vision, their attitude, their effort is simply to please Prabhupada, to try to follow Prabhupada. That's their motive. Hopefully, I mean, in most cases, it will be. And that's the unity. We're all unified around giving Krishna and Prabhupada pleasure. So we have to remember that. And diversity is a good thing if we can keep the unity. It's not a good thing if it destroys unity, obviously. Chutananda Das says, in Australia, during a marathon, Prabhupada encouraged there be some competition to sell the most books. The result is one devotee slashed the car tires of another to prevent him from getting out on the street early. I don't think that's what Prabhupada had in mind. Well, Achut Ananda Das. It's important to know that anything good can be used for bad purposes. Anything healthy can become unhealthy if we're not careful. Correct? Yeah. So we saw a lot of unhealthy competition. Prabhupada liked the competition because devotees were getting enthused to compete and outdo one another. But sometimes it turned ugly. We had this one devotee. Oh, this is a riot. Now you're getting to hear all the horror stories. Well, not really horror stories, kind of funny stories. This one devotee, like, we'd go on Sankirtan, right? And then you'd have all the donations you collected would be in your bag, and then the bags would go somewhere, and then they would be counted. So this devotee always wanted to be number one. I don't know why she wanted to be number one. I guess there can be multiple reasons why somebody wants to be number one, you know. Maybe you feel more significant, more loved, more appreciated. But she came to our temple from somewhere, and all of a sudden, she was collecting huge on Sankirtan, and nobody could figure out why was she doing that. And we finally found out later how she was doing it. When no one was looking, she was taking money out of everyone's bag and putting it in hers. She always had the biggest collection. True story. Circa 1974. I won't say what temple, and I won't say her name. But true story. So, the degenerating stories of competition. Prabhupada liked competition. Had a lot of devotees turned against it after a while because they saw it had raised its ugly head in some cases. KB says, I can appreciate the sentiment of unity and diversity, but when a group includes people whose opinions are harmful or abusive to others within the movement, and of course sometimes you don't have a choice of that, what is to be done? I have a solution. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. You cannot change anyone's mind. And so now, KB has brought up another point. I will expand on this point. And I will quote my God brothers. There are many religious people who are not spiritual. Well, his exact quote was, there are many religious people in ISKCON who are not spiritual. By religious, he meant they're very strict sadhakas. They follow religious principles. But they may have horrible relationships. They may be prejudiced, critical, racist even. What to do? Like Vijay Lakshmi was saying, we're kind of molded to believe certain things. Now, people growing up in America, devotees growing up in America, I would say, are not liberal or conservative by nature, but factually, not necessarily more liberal or conservative than having a more liberal or conservative nature than anybody else, but by cultural upbringing, by the scale of liberal or conservative, they're on the far left of liberal, even though they're like really good devotees, because that's the culture they're raised in, which is a more accepting culture of all kinds of diversities. People who are raised in like 1930s, 40s, even 50s, in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, or other conservative places, they may be just as good a devotee as the young people, but their view culturally is going to be totally different. And so their view is going to be much more within certain lines. It's like this and it's not like this. Where the younger people will say, well, maybe you're like this, maybe you're like this, it doesn't matter, that's just what you're like, and be a devotee. What can you do? And you might say, but our Shastra says this. And it does say this, but when a person's culturally conditioned, it doesn't always translate into the way you think it should translate culturally. That's just a fact. When I was in India, I was in Bangalore, India. And I left Bangalore last March of 2020. And we were having a discussion about female Diksha gurus. And one thing that was obvious was that concept of a female Diksha guru within ISKCON, there was like everyone I had discussed, well, not everyone, because I didn't discuss with everyone, but the devotees I had discussed it with, it was like, you ever have a discussion with someone and there's like no place in their brain for that idea, and you're trying to get that idea in, but it can't stick because there's no box for it to go into, and it just kind of bounces out, and they look at you like, what are you talking about? Have you ever had a conversation like that with somebody? Like you're trying to make a point, and there's no box in their head for that point. It's just like it doesn't fit in. It's like it's a different shape. Or there's just, all the boxes are closed, and they haven't created a box for that idea. And you can't get it in. And it's not their fault. It's just they didn't grow up with that box. So, and they're good devotees, and they're nice devotees, and, they're humble and compassionate, but they just don't have this box because that's not part of their culture. And so they can seem kind of narrow-minded, black and white, unkind perhaps, but not necessarily true. It's just they don't have that box. Or their kids have that box because they grew up in a different culture. Are their kids more magnanimous, more open-minded as a personality trait? Probably not necessarily. It's just they grew up with different boxes. I think it's just, that's just the reality. And I like to say, if you don't, like they say, in some parts of America, there's a saying, because the weather changes like rapidly. I came to my give class one morning, and it was 65 degrees. And I gave class, and I walked back to the house, it was 45 degrees. This is from 8 to 9:30. Usually it gets warmer, right? So in some parts of the world, at least in Florida, I think it said, they say, if you don't like the weather, just wait 10 minutes or wait a half hour, because it keeps changing. It's going to be stormy, rainy, thunderstorms, Indra's getting angry. And then 10, 15, 20 minutes later, half hour later, it's like bright, sunny, hot, humid. Next morning, it's like freezing, frost. 3 days later, it's like too hot to go outside. So that's kind of my motto with the cultural issues within ISKCON. Say, well, if you don't like it, just wait. Wait for the next generation to become leaders, because it'll change. It's going to change. It has to change. I don't see how it cannot change. And you could say, no, but our Shastra says this and that. It doesn't matter. It matters the culture okay, we're getting challenged here. This is a 5G moment. The culture within which, that's what I was trying to say, within which we're applying Krishna consciousness, and the culture of the people who are leaders is going to highly affect how it's applied, right? And so, Kaylee, you go to one temple and it's like everything is like this, and you go to another temple and everything is like that, and you're thinking, they're using the same books. Why is it like this? Why is it like that? Like Vijay Lakshmi said, look at the leaders. Where are they from? What's their age? How were they raised? What's their nature? It's not that people don't have a liberal, conservative nature, but it's so relative, liberal 1950 is like probably ultra-conservative in 2021, so, or extremely conservative. So some of these things you can't change, and you can only find, like Krishna Karsani said, find people you can relate to, who are more accepting of the ideals that you have. This is a huge problem in religion, because we're going to look at something and say, your religion teaches compassion, equality, kindness, etc., etc., etc. But you people seem prejudiced. Where did that come from? Let's be honest. It didn't come from the scripture. It came from the culture or the individual who read in the scripture something that seems to validate their prejudice as a religious ideal. So my being prejudiced is not prejudice. I'm being chaste to the scripture. And the other person said, you're not being chaste to the scripture, you're doing the exact opposite. This is called human life. And my conclusion, Keely, after looking at things like this, my conclusion is go back to Godhead, because you won't have this problem there. The material world is so interesting because even in places where you're not supposed to have these problems, you may have them. That's what's so frustrating, isn't it? Sometimes you might hear a devotee say something and you think, wait a minute, you're a devotee. How could you say that? It seems so hard, cold, unsympathetic. That's the way it is, Prabhu. It's just like that, you know. You want me to say something that's not true? It's just how it is. What can I say? Okay. You can't argue with it. He's just repeating what is in Shastra. But the way it's been applied could be hurting a lot of people, or the way it's being presented. But that's just who he is. You know, that's like a reality. What can you do? It's just, you know. The beauty is we're a variety. We're like flowers in a bouquet. So we're all different colors. And there are plenty of devotees who are your color. And so you just want to hang out with the devotees who, you know, you relate with. And just cooperate. I think we all start as Indians and end up as Americans, don't we? Yeah. I just heard something really interesting. It said, in the history of the world, there has been no religious movement that's become successful internationally that has changed the indigenous culture. That has, it said, if you make an attempt to change the culture of the country you're preaching in, at least from the historical records, you won't be successful. You can't be successful that way. That's interesting, isn't it? So, do we really want to Indianize the world? We want to Christianize it. Krishna says, perhaps Krishna places people who really trigger us in our path due to our karma, so that we work with our narthas and advance one step further, even if it feels very uncomfortable. Yeah, they're called husbands and wives. Bosses, children, and temple roommates. Yeah, that's what they're called. And even if Krishna didn't personally place them in your path, they're just by statistical averages, they'll fall in your path anyway. And you will take it as, okay, Krishna, I guess here's an opportunity to practice some tolerance, because this person is driving me crazy. I know they're a nice devotee, but they're driving me crazy. In fact, they're driving everyone crazy. Now it's a chance for us to really look at how tolerant we are, how patient we are, and so forth. Yeah. So naturally, the material world is a great place to practice. I don't know, if you're into sports, you go to a practice field and they have all these, like this equipment, you can practice throwing balls, batting balls, doing this, So the material world is a great place to practice pure devotional service, because it's got all the equipment, people who will bother you, situations that will bother you, prejudiced people, angry people, people who look like devotees who don't always act like devotees. It's got it all. People who mistreat you. Great place to practice, isn't it? And a great place not to come back to, in my humble opinion. Prabhu, Mataji, if I were you, I want to come back here, because if you come back here, then you're coming back to all the problems that you left. So why would you want to come back to a place that you're always complaining about anyway? Does that make sense? Krishna Karshani says, Malgor Jata ke Karshani says. So what practical means to love devotees we hate? It's not easy, and often is ending up with disaster. how to love the devotees you hate. I will ask you, Krishna Karshani, to meditate on that and come up with an answer and let us know your answer. I'll tell you my answer. My answer is this, that without devotees, I can't be Krishna conscious. So, let's say you were falsely accused of a crime. You look just like the criminal and the police throw you in the cart and they take you to the jail. And when you get to the jail, there's like 5 other devotees also falsely accused. It's a conspiracy to stop the Hare Krishna movement. And these 5 other devotees are the 5 devotees you hate. You're like, oh no, that Prabhu, this is just being with that Prabhu outside the jail is worse than jail. So, and the police officers sees you going crazy. Oh no, I'm not going to be with these people. They drive me crazy. And the officer says, well, you could choose any other 5 criminals over there to go in jail with, you know, if you don't want to be in jail with these 5. Well, Krishna Karshani, what would you decide? Choose 5 other people? And you get to choose them. You find the nice people you like, get along with. And you're just going to be in prison in one cell with these people, 24/7 for who knows how long. Or 24/7 with these devotees you hate. Probably most of us, well, you'll say, well, it depends on what the other people are like. Well, I can tell you what they're like. They like to drink alcohol. They like to talk and engage in illicit sex. They like to eat meat. And they pretty much like to talk about everything other than Krishna. And then you have these other 5 devotees, and you know they chant Hare Krishna, they talk about Krishna, this and that. Who would you choose to live with? Hopefully, I think most of us, or all of us, not hopefully, would choose to live with the devotees. Why? Because I need the devotees in order to be Krishna conscious, and without the devotees, I can't be Krishna conscious. Therefore, that's why I appreciate the devotees, even the ones I hate, because I love you, Prabhu, because without you, I couldn't be Krishna conscious. That's why I love you, even though being with you is not always easy. But if there weren't devotees, I wouldn't be a devotee. So that's how I understand it. But you can also meditate on it. And we need Chinese governance in ISKCON. Oh, there would be a riot if we had Chinese governance. We Westerners, God, if we Westerners, Americans especially, were governed by the Chinese, it would not be pretty. It would be a huge civil war. Tanya is quoting the Bible. This is Jesus, right? Is this a Sermon on the Mount? You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you in that way. You will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for you for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are only kind to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Even the pigs love the piglets, right? Even the animals form little gangs to protect themselves. You know, Jesus was like really to the point. And sometimes very heavy. I like reading quotes like that. He doesn't beat around the bush. Which is you. When you read quotes like this, it's easy to understand why the Christians have decided just be saved. And, you know, that's the best you can do. Because to follow these kinds of instructions, I think, you know, it's a big challenge. You know how I joke sometimes and say, well, you know, if you had to fill out an application form to be a Hare Krishna, and you must answer yes to these 10 questions. And one of the questions Are you ready to love the people who hate you? Let me think about that. If you don't want any devotees to join ISKCON, then you put that question on there, because even the ones who will say yes just to get in the temple, after a while, they might have second thoughts. Love my enemy? I don't know. That's like tall order. KB says, I don't hate any devotee, I just don't like them all. No, she didn't say that. I recognize that some are misled, to be clear, and to be a little vulnerable. I am an LGBT person, and personally I have encountered some devotees who have said hurtful things to me, and people like me. I choose not to associate. You can't associate with those people, though I don't hate them, and I don't think that anything is to be gained by seeking unity with them. Well, unity means not... unity means... And this is a good point, because in some sense, unity means just don't fight them. But unity, as I understand, what Prabhupada means is, I serve my way, you serve your way, and we don't shoot one another. Doesn't necessarily mean I support you or agree with you, but I'm not going to attack you. And for a person like you, it seems obvious that you just understand that you separate their conditioning from them as people. Because as people, they may be very nice, but their conditioning may be to attack you. That's their conditioning. I mean, I know I have devotees, friends, very good friends, who are very nice devotees, very nice people, who were raised in very conservative environments, and they have very conservative views about Krishna consciousness, which seem to be somewhat independent of Prabhupada's views, although they will isolate those statements of Prabhupada that seem to support those views. It's interesting also, because sometimes Prabhupada talks about Vedic culture, but he doesn't always say, this is what we're supposed to do today. So that's a distinction, It's like, this is how the culture was. Okay, so we understand this is how the culture was. So what's the principle? What do we learn from this? And how would we apply that principle today? But sometimes people take it, well, that's what the culture was, and therefore that's what it's supposed to be today. That's where you run into problems. Well, if that's the way it is, all you men, fathers, should marry your daughters by the time they're 12 or 13. But that's illegal, and probably not the best thing to do in our culture. Actually, we're going to have a talk on that on Friday. Friday. I don't know if it's broadcast Friday, but we're going to have a talk. There's a film, what's the name of that film? On the Road to Vrindavan or something. It's about girls' plight in India. And I wrote the devotee who made the film, and I said, all the problems that it seems the girls are having that you've interviewed are because they're trying to follow the Vedic standard. I said, how do you feel about that? That must be weighing heavy on your mind. He said, yeah. He said, why don't we have a discussion on it? It'll help promote the film. The film is meant to help promote Food for Life and the work they're doing with the girls. So we're going to have a discussion. I don't know. It's going to be 9:30 on Friday, but if you don't see any ad, it means it's going to come out later at another time. So it's going to be an interesting discussion about this. The very thing we're supposed to do ends up causing so many problems. Interesting, right? So, together we stand, divided we fall. Yeah. Wasn't that like Churchill or something? John says he has those conversations every day. So this is not a reality of the Hare Krishna movement. It's a religious reality, a political reality. It's a human life reality. Yeah. So we love, like another interpretation of love those you hate is, yeah, I love you as long as you're like a mile away from me. So sometimes that's It's better you're a mile away, because that way you're not on my mind and you're not doing anything to bother me, and I'm not having to listen to the things you say that upset me, so I can love you from a distance. It's easier. That would be a good song also, right? Marco? I love you as long as you're a mile away. As long as you're on the other side of the sea, then I'll love you. Yeah. Krishnakanta says, I heard that in the U.S. there's an Hinduization of ISKCON. Is it true? A lot of Indians, immigrants. Well, what it means is that when ISKCON was young, there were very few Indians in America. And now there are millions of Indians in America. When I was in San Diego, there were 2 Indian families in the 70s. 2 Indian families in the whole city of San Diego. Now, I would imagine there's 1,000 Indian families, at least hundreds. So if there's hundreds of Indian families, then at the temple, if there's thousands of Indian families then at the temple, there's at least going to be 50 or 60 or 70. And that starts to outdo the number of people coming locally. So there was simultaneously a rise in the number of people of Hindu origin coming to ISKCON, looking for spirituality in this dark, bleak, west dry desert called America, which they thought was paradise. But it's paradise materially, but they were lacking their cultural and spiritual roots. And so they start gravitating towards ISKCON and other Hindu organizations. Simultaneously, the movement was shrinking in terms of its outreach towards Western people. And so more Indians were coming, less Americans were coming. And that posed a problem, not caused by the Indians in and of themselves, but the temples became more, naturally because it was mostly Indians, became more relevant to the needs of Indians. The kind of kirtans, classes, prasadam, cultural events, and so on, were oriented towards Indians because they were the ones cooking. They were the ones doing everything. They were the ones managing the temples in many cases. So the problem it created inadvertently was that as a Western person, you come to a temple. In some temples, there might be 200 Indians and 3 Americans, which makes you feel like, I guess this is for Indians. Unless you really like India and Indian culture and being with Indians, you might feel out of place. So that's what happened. So when they say the Hinduization, it wasn't necessarily a conscious effort. All the Indians said, get the Americans out of ISKCON, they're ruining it. It was just the Americans weren't coming so much anymore. And there wasn't so much outreach towards the Americans. Now a lot of devotees are doing outreach programs just for Americans. Not that they wouldn't want Indians to come and have a sign, no Indians allowed. But they're doing programs which are more relatable to Westerners. For Indians, it's the cultural things. The artiks, the samskaras, these kinds of things. The fired up Indian preacher telling Leela, this is what excites them. But Western people, it's different. Different kind of prasadam, different kind of kirtan, different kind of lecture, different kind of association. So that became the problem. Now, never became a problem in South America because there's so few Indians there. So they just kept going on as they were going. But in places that had lots of Indian immigrants, temples started to become run by Indians. The Indians were getting initiated. They were becoming leaders because there was no one else to do it. So it inadvertently created a problem. Like, okay, where's the local people now? Well, it looks like an Indian temple now. So, and it's more oriented towards Indians. And even if it's not oriented towards Indians, if you come and you're not Indian, you're like, is this the right address? Or like this, thought this was the Hare Krishna temple. It looks like some Hindus, society. So that's kind of what happened. Sardi says, I have a question slightly off topic. You mentioned that some devotees may be very competitive. How do we deal with such a person in a community if they always want to be number one, have the spotlight, so that we encourage them in their service, but at the same time don't reinforce their self-centered behavior? Is the cause of this behavior always a lack of self-esteem? It could be lack of self-esteem. It could be so many things. And an excellent question, which we may not be able to answer in general because every situation is different. But my wife told me something, or my daughter told me something. And I'll just share this with you. And this is not going to answer your question entirely because I don't think I could, because I would need specifics. We had a sannyasi named Vishnu Jan Swami, and some of you know the story. He was one of the most charismatic, inspirational devotees. And he started feeling guilty about something, we're not sure. And I don't think he did anything wrong, but I think it was more what he was thinking about. Perhaps thinking about, caring about his former family after he took sannyas. Or maybe he even spoke to his former wife. And he felt so bad about it. And he asked Prabhupada, about sannyas and connecting with women. And Prabhupada said, yes, the principle is you should kill yourself, but we don't do that. And he only heard the first part. He didn't hear the last part. And he went, apparently, killed himself. So Hridayananda Maharaj was saying, he said, I deeply regret that I wasn't sensitive enough to know something was wrong with him, so I could have spoke to him before he did that. That I didn't see something, he wasn't his normal self. So I really like that, to be sensitive to feel, is there something wrong with this Prabhu, or this devotee that I should be administering to? I should be conscious of something. So if this devotee is like, number one is everything, and it's going too far, probably there is a problem, and you may want to give notice to someone who could talk to that person, say, I think this is a problem. It seems like they're more obsessed with being number one than serving. And maybe someone should talk to them. So being sensitive to that, I think, is good. How it's dealt with will depend on that. So I was right, Tanya said, the Sermon on the Mount. That Sermon on the Mount, wow. If you want to get like a booster shot of spirituality, not religiosity, read the Sermon on the Mount. But you got to be a man to hear it, because it's to the point. John says, so many people I served in my work over years have poked at my anartha. Thankful for that. But I had to practice putting on the brakes and listening. Still do. Probably always will. Life is not easy. It's not. Vijay Lakshmi says, well, this is kind of a follow-up to what you said, John. Without bad devotee association, we cannot be pruned. Yeah. Dear Lord Krishna, thank you for putting all these bad devotees in my life, because they're so helpful. Prabhu, thank you for being such a bad devotee, because you help. Without you, how would I learn to practice tolerance? That's another Bhakta Burfi skit. Prabhu, I am so grateful to you. What did I do? You are such a bad devotee. You disturb me so much. It's such a challenge. You have taught me tolerance like no one else has taught me. Thank you for being such a bad devotee. I really appreciate it. That's a Bhakta Burfi moment. But it's true. Now you're all falling off your seats laughing, right? Because you know it's true. If your purpose in life, Vijay Lakshmi says, if your purpose in life is to be peaceful on the way to KC, then don't give your remote control to others. When we adjust and don't give in to bad reaction, we are the winners. Yeah, another test. You're gonna bring people up, or you're gonna come down because of them. That's going to be interesting. We have a film, Road to Vrindavan. Yeah, I don't know if you can watch it without giving a donation, but that's the film, Road to Vrindavan, and then we're going to do an interview on Friday, and you'll find out when it's going to be posted. I think it's going to be really. I'm going to be interviewing the devotee who made the film. I don't know if he knows that, but I want to ask him what he was experiencing, because he was right there in India, talking to all the people, all the girls who are, being put to marriage at 12 and their futures kind of set in stone and not always so great. And I wanted to ask him, well, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? They're just doing the Vedic thing, and this is the result. It's going to be an interesting discussion. When doing the Vedic thing backfires, basically. That's a controversial title for which I could get my head chopped off. I will suggest that title, and if you don't see me on the show, you know what happened. Somebody didn't like that title. Okay, we went overtime. What a discussion. Oh my God. Hare Krishna. Let us thank all the Prabhus who drive us crazy. By their mercy, we can learn forgiveness and tolerance. The famous last words of Bhakta Burfi. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.